Part 5, Teacher Effectiveness Research, How People Learn. This is information taken from How People Learn, Expanded Edition, the National Research Council. Highly recommend that book. An advanced organizer so you can see the structure of what is to come. Pause, pause, ping. First of all, some general information or ideas. Well-organized knowledge, presenting well-organized knowledge, providing it, enhances the encoding of this knowledge, the understanding, and the transfer. It makes learning easier. To be usable, knowledge must be connected and organized. If you're going to understand that, you must be able to connect it to something new. Number 2, what students don't know is just as important as what they do know. Effective teachers construct new knowledge and understanding based on what students already know. They get a sense of both students' developmental level and what they may or may not know, and they make those connections. And the third idea, humans are naturally goal-oriented. They naturally want to learn. They naturally want to clear up confusion. If they see chaos, they naturally look for order. Number 2, there is a place for teaching by telling. Explicit instruction, put the teach back in teacher. Yes, we have activities. Yes, we have discovery learning. Yes, we have whole language instruction, but we also know there is places for explicit instruction. It is the quickest and most economic way to get information from point A to point B and beyond. Number 2, complexity is not the same as rigor. We simplify the curriculum. Now again, this does not mean we lay down or lower the rigor of academic standards. Too often we try to cover a curriculum and we succeed only in covering it up. Simply adding hundreds of more standards or objectives, this is at odds with how human beings learn. We need to, point number 3, teach fewer things but cover them more in depth. Instead of layers of sand, we have to think of carrots with lots of roots. So teach fewer things but cover them more in depth so you can see the connections. And again, complexity, making things complicated, and a whole bunch of this, that, and the other thing, does not enhance learning. It's not the same as rigor. Simplify the curriculums. We see that in teacher education all the time. The great state keeps adding more and more of little bits of things, thinking that we're going to create more learning and a better teaching product. This is at odds with a body of research on teacher education, but more importantly, it is at odds with a body of research that shows how students learn. In Minnesota, we would be far better served by having fewer standards foisted on our teacher education programs so we can actually cover the important ones in depth. Enough said on that. Integrated units or thematic units, that key concepts are taught across the curriculum. In a perfect classroom, there are no curriculum borders. Students should be asked, what class are we in? That means learning is happening. In a middle school or a high school, you probably can't have that, but you can reinforce some ideas or concepts or skills in various classes. This means maybe a science and a social studies teacher having to work together. You teach metacognitive skills as part of the curriculum. Metacognitive means, cognitive means thinking. Meta means thinking about thinking. That students are aware of how to think about subjects or skills. Metacognition. One example of this is to stop when you're reading, pause, ask yourself, do I understand? If not, resume. That's a metacognitive skill. I'm making my thinking visible. I'm thinking out loud. I teach students how to think. Pedagogical tools or strategies are seen as tools, not cures. One tool is not inherently better than the other. A tool any pedagogical tool or technique is only as good as how it is used. There's a place for everything in education. There's a place for cooperative learning. There's a place for direct instruction, for use of worksheets. Yes, they are all tools. Their effectiveness is dependent on how they are used. Number 7, you link classroom learning to the greatest extent possible to students' lives so it becomes relevant, so they can see how it is used. And time to learn. Real learning takes time versus exposure. If you try to cover too much, too fast, this hinders learning. Students get disorganized, isolated principles, not enough specific information to really make these ideas meaningful. An example of this, one semester, I tried to one more thing my students to death. It was the last day of the class, and I said, well, you need to know this one more thing. And essentially, I created more confusion. Trying to get too much in too fast really is meaningless. And then learn for understanding. Sometimes less is more. Too many curriculums present too many disconnected facts in too short of time. Or when reading is broken down in a series of little sub-skills, you don't really understand. Now, a steam engine, I use that as a metaphor because a steam engine essentially has one piston. It is very efficient. Versus a gasoline engine has a whole bunch of working parts and is not as efficient in capturing all the energy. Trying to throw too many things at students hinders learning. So we're learning for understanding. And motivation. Motivation affects both the time and effort students are willing to devote to learning. Now again, humans are naturally motivated to solve problems. Extrinsic rewards also hinder motivation because it externalizes it. Good teachers create challenge at the proper level. To remain motivated, we have to find just that spot above their independent level in that zone of proximal development. Students are more motivated to learn when they have social opportunities, when you're able to talk to other people, to kids. This makes them more highly motivated, talking with each other versus sitting passively. And students can see the usefulness of what they are learning. You don't say you'll need this someday. You try to create authentic learning experiences that replicate reality and that students will use in their real life to the greatest extent possible.